on September 15, 1940, in Tokyo's Prime Minister's residence, a cloud of cigarette smoke filled the air as Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto extinguished his third lucky strike during the meeting. The American cigarettes were an ironic touch that went unnoticed by none there. Prime Minister Prince Fumimaro Konoe had cut straight to the heart of the matter with a direct question, bypassing the typical diplomatic circumlocutions. If we engage in war with America, what are our chances? Yamamoto's response would become etched in history as a somber prediction for Japan. He stated that if ordered to fight regardless of consequences, he would run rampant for 6 months or a year, but had no confidence beyond that period. The other military leaders fidgeted uneasily at this statement from the man who would command any war against America. They were hearing their leader forecast defeat even before hostilities commenced. Unbeknownst to them, Yamamoto was not merely guessing. He had personally observed American industrial might during his time in the United States. He had toured factories and oil fields, meticulously calculating production capabilities down to the last detail. The grim arithmetic of war had been painstakingly worked out years earlier while studying at Harvard University and later confirmed by visiting steel mills and exploring vast oil reserves in Texas. Yamamoto knew a truth that his peers were reluctant to face. Japan was destined for defeat from the outset if it went to war with America. The sole variable would be time, specifically 6 months before American industrial power could fully mobilize. Born on April 4, 1884, Isoroku Yamamoto came into this world in Nagaoka, a small city within Niigata Prefecture, as the sixth son of an impoverished schoolteacher who was already 56 years old at his birth. He received his name from its numerical significance. Life for the family was marked by severe poverty and hardship. They frequently managed to scrape by on sweet potatoes and barley due to their inability to afford rice. This early struggle would later make Yamamoto's observations of American abundance all the more striking. In 1916, the young naval officer was adopted into the Yamamoto family, a practice common in Japanese society for career advancement. By that time, he had already lost 2 fingers on his left hand during the Battle of Tsushima in 1905, where he witnessed Japan's remarkable victory over Russia's Baltic fleet. This triumph convinced many in Japan that spiritual superiority could overcome material disadvantages, an illusion Yamamoto would spend his life debunking. As a Tsushima veteran, Yamamoto understood something his peers did not. Japan's victory over Russia was possible only because Russia had to project power across vast distances while simultaneously dealing with domestic revolution. America, however, faced no such constraints. To fully grasp this reality, Yamamoto needed first-hand experience of America. His first opportunity came in 1919 when, as a 35-year-old commander, he received orders that would not only change his life, but also the course of history. To report to Harvard University for English language studies and to observe American naval developments. What followed would transform Yamamoto from an ardent Japanese patriot into a Cassandra-like figure warning of impending doom that few would heed. In April 1919, Yamamoto arrived at Harvard carrying 2 swords and wearing his naval uniform, becoming an intriguing sight among the ivy-covered buildings of Cambridge. He enrolled as a special student, ostensibly to study English, though his transcript later revealed only mediocre grades in the language course. Yet this grade masked the true extent of his education. Living modestly in Brooklyn, Massachusetts, Yamamoto established a rigorous routine that would have appeared obsessive to onlookers. He slept just 3 to 4 hours each night, dedicating the rest of his time to reading extensively about American industry, oil production, and aviation. His room filled with maps of oil fields, statistical abstracts of manufacturing data, and technical journals on steel production. Yamamoto's future was one powered by oil. While other Japanese students at Harvard during his tenure attended formal classes, Yamamoto spent countless hours at the Widener Library researching petroleum geology and refining capacity. He discovered that America produced 65% of the world's oil, with a staggering output of 378 million barrels in 1919 alone. Japan was entirely dependent on imports for its oil supplies, primarily from the United States. However, Yamamoto's true education occurred during his Harvard University summer breaks, when he embarked on extended journeys across America with minimal funds. His inaugural significant trip led him to Texas's oil fields, where he spent 3 weeks examining extraction and refining techniques, while subsisting on bread, bananas, and water, frequently sleeping outdoors or in barns to conserve money for more detailed observations. During the summer of 1920, Yamamoto found himself outside the Ford Highland Park plant in Detroit, witnessing thousands of workers exiting after their shifts. The sight of so many individuals commuting in private cars would have been inconceivable in Japan, where even military personnel rarely owned automobiles. He had hitchhiked nearly 1,000 miles from Cambridge to study Henry Ford's famous production methods firsthand. Inside the factory, Yamamoto pretended to be an engineering student to tour the assembly line that revolutionized manufacturing. A Model T rolled off the line every 45 seconds, and workers executed repetitive tasks with precise timing. The entire process, from raw steel to finished automobile, took just 93 minutes. Over the course of a week, Yamamoto filled 3 notebooks with detailed observations. He calculated that Ford's workforce alone was larger than the entirety of the Japanese Navy, and its daily steel consumption surpassed Japan's weekly production. Yamamoto found this particularly alarming because it represented only one company in a single city within a single industry. In a letter to his mentor, Admiral Thomas Aburo, he wrote, "The Americans have turned manufacturing into a science. They produce machines with the same systematic efficiency we use for rice cultivation, but on an unimaginable scale. Each worker is specialized, and every process is meticulously measured. Each enhancement is implemented without delay. There are no wasted resources, delays, or inefficiencies." The statistics were remarkable. American automobile production surged from 480,000 vehicles in 1915 to 2.3 million by 1920. By the time of Yamamoto's visit, every 13 Americans owned a car, whereas in Japan only one vehicle was available for every 5,000 people. Beyond these figures, Yamamoto grasped a deeper significance. He realized that mass automobile production implied an extensive capability for manufacturing military vehicles. The assembly lines producing Model T cars could just as readily manufacture trucks, tanks, and aircraft engines. Workers skilled in precision manufacturing were equally adept at crafting weapons, while the vast supply chains delivering parts to Detroit factories could also deliver ammunition to battlefields. Yamamoto undertook his most unauthorized journey to Texas during the summer of 1921, shortly before he graduated from Harvard. He was missing for 6 weeks and caused minor diplomatic concern by skipping several official functions. His goal was to observe what he termed the sources of power, the oil fields in East Texas. By freight train and on foot, Yamamoto reached Beaumont near the Spindletop Field, where the modern oil industry originated in 1901. Although past its peak, this field still yielded thousands of barrels daily. Over several days, Yamamoto spoke with rig workers and engineers to learn about drilling methods, extraction rates, and refining processes. The scale was beyond Japanese comprehension. A single well could produce more oil in a day than Japan imported in an entire week. At the Texaco refinery in Port Arthur, which Yamamoto meticulously sketched, 100,000 barrels were processed daily. The entire facility operated around the clock with electric pumps and lighting. Yamamoto penned in his journal that oil is the lifeblood of contemporary warfare, fueling ships, aircraft, tanks, and trucks alike. America sits on vast reserves of this crucial resource, whereas Japan lacks any significant domestic supply. This disparity shapes every strategic decision. He journeyed north to Kilgore and Longview, witnessing firsthand the rapid expansion of East Texas's oil industry. Derrick towers sprang up in abundance, forming a dense network that allowed workers to move from one rig to another without ever touching the ground. Natural gas, viewed as surplus by some, was flared into flames that illuminated the night sky for miles around. The wasteful burning of this natural resource especially struck Yamamoto. In contrast to Japan's meticulous conservation of imported fuel, America appeared to squander enough natural gas daily to power an entire city like Tokyo for a month. This profligate use of resources reinforced his belief in American invincibility more than any military demonstration ever could. Returning to the United States as Japan's naval attaché in Washington with the rank of captain in January 1926, Yamamoto's posting lasted until March 1928. During this period, he confirmed every apprehension from his Harvard days. With official status and a proper budget, he traveled freely and gathered intelligence systematically. His primary focus was updating his knowledge about industrial production capabilities in the United States. Since his previous visit, automobile manufacturing had surged towards producing 4.3 million vehicles by 1926. Steel output reached 48 million tons annually, while oil extraction surpassed 770 million barrels per year. These figures were not merely increasing, they were accelerating dramatically. Their speed increased. Yamamoto developed a meticulous pattern of observation. From Monday to Wednesday, he engaged in naval conferences and diplomatic events at the embassy. Thursdays through Sundays, his itinerary remained consistent with a singular objective: assessing production capacity, resource extraction, and technological progress. His travels included visits to the Bethlehem Steel plant in Pennsylvania, where he witnessed the manufacturing process for naval armor plate. The plant's electric furnaces were capable of producing specialized steel in hours, whereas Japanese foundries required weeks to achieve similar results. With a workforce of 30,000 employees and electricity consumption surpassing that of the city of Kyoto, the facility operated at an impressive scale. In Birmingham, Alabama, he examined the iron ore supply chain crucial for American steel production. Trains arrived hourly from Minnesota's Mississippi Range with iron ore, Pennsylvania with coal, and Indiana with limestone, demonstrating an efficient and integrated system that left him in awe. The materials traveled thousands of miles with precise coordination via telegraph and telephone networks, which Japan could not match. During his time in Washington, Yamamoto was well known for organizing poker nights at his apartment every Friday evening. He invited American naval officers, diplomats, and intelligence officials to these gatherings, which were more than just social events. They served as covert intelligence operations conducted through cards and drinks. Captain Ellis Zacharias of Naval Intelligence frequently participated. Decades later, in his 1946 memoir titled Secret Missions, Zacharias disclosed that these games involved strategic questioning between participants. As they played poker, the players would discreetly inquire about naval strategies, ship capabilities, and overall thinking. Yamamoto was a master at poker, Zacharias remembered, noting his ability to recall every card dealt, quickly assess probabilities, and read body language with great accuracy. However, the games were crucial for him to grasp the mindset of Americans. He sought to comprehend their decision-making processes, their thought patterns, and their reactions under pressure. Through poker, Yamamoto discovered a vital aspect about the American character. They were willing risk-takers who could withstand losses. They bet boldly due to substantial financial reserves, enabling them to recover from setbacks and keep playing. This attitude, Yamamoto recognized, mirrored America's broader strategic approach. The nation could sustain defeats in individual battles or campaigns while still maintaining its overall resolve to continue the fight. On a February night in 1926, after winning a significant amount of money at poker, Yamamoto made an observation that Zacharias never forgot. In both poker and war, the player with more chips can afford to wait for favorable conditions. He likened Japan's situation to gambling with borrowed funds against an opponent who owns the casino. During his time in America, Yamamoto's most profound strategic insight revolved around aviation. Unlike many naval officers of that era, he realized that aircraft would shape future naval conflicts. Given its resources and industrial capabilities, America was well suited to dominate this emerging domain. He visited the Glenn L. Martin Company in Cleveland, Ohio, where aircraft were manufactured using automobile-style assembly lines. Even workers without prior aviation experience could construct sophisticated planes within weeks thanks to efficient production methods. The factory churned out 6 airplanes daily with the aid of electric tools and powered conveyors that accelerated manufacturing processes. In Dayton, Ohio, at McCook Field's, a precursor to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Yamamoto observed cutting-edge American research in aviation technology. The facility boasted a larger contingent of aeronautical engineers than the entire country of Japan could claim. It was equipped with wind tunnels, engine testing stations, and materials research labs that outshone anything Japanese aviation had to offer. The statistics were telling. In 1926, American aircraft manufacturers churned out 186 military planes and 5 789 civilian aircraft. Meanwhile, U.S. airlines had established regular mail and passenger services spanning the continent. In contrast, Japan managed a yearly output of just 200 aircraft, mostly relying on imported engines and instruments. They think in 3 dimensions, Yamamoto noted in his report to Tokyo, emphasizing that while we refine our battleship designs, they are constructing the foundations for aerial combat. They possess aluminum production capabilities, cutting-edge engine technology, and above all, the manufacturing prowess necessary to produce thousands of aircraft. His warnings largely fell on deaf ears. The Japanese Navy continued to prioritize battleships, aiming for a decisive surface confrontation that Yamamoto believed would never materialize. Aircraft carriers were still regarded as auxiliary vessels, useful primarily for reconnaissance missions rather than pivotal roles in battle. Yamamoto's most extensive tour of American industry took place during the summer of 1926. Leveraging his diplomatic status and carefully cultivated relationships, he secured access to facilities rarely seen by foreign visitors. Each visit provided valuable data points supporting his growing belief in America's overwhelming industrial might. At Ford Motor Company's River Road complex in Dearborn, Michigan, Yamamoto witnessed the seamless integration of American manufacturing power. The sprawling 2,000-acre facility was essentially a city unto itself. Raw materials such as iron and coal arrived by ship and train, while rubber came from Firestone plantations in Liberia. From steel smelting to final assembly, every stage of production occurred on site. With an employee base of 100,000 workers and its own power plant generating 400,000 horsepower, the complex exemplified American industrial dominance. The sheer magnitude surpassed Yamamoto's meticulous planning. Though he had delved into the statistics, first-hand experience revealed a different reality. Massive blast furnaces loomed tall and operated non-stop. Mile-long assembly lines were in constant motion. The parking lots accommodated 25,000 employee vehicles, surpassing the total number of cars found in most Japanese cities. At Standard Oil's Bayway refinery in New Jersey, Yamamoto encountered an industrial-scale operation processing 100,000 barrels daily and producing a wide range of petroleum products, from fuels to chemicals. The catalytic cracking towers, invented just a few years prior, doubled the amount of gasoline extracted from crude oil compared to Japanese refineries. They have cracked the code for modern warfare, Yamamoto observed. Unlimited raw materials combined with immense production capacity and continuous innovation equate to inevitable triumph. Japan lacks these assets entirely. In late 1926, Yamamoto visited California under the guise of attending a naval conference in San Francisco, but his true purpose was to evaluate America's Pacific military capabilities. What he discovered was a coast transforming into an industrial fortress. The May Island Naval Shipyard in Vallejo could simultaneously build and repair capital ships, boasting electrical capacity surpassing all Japanese naval bases combined. Military installations encircled San Francisco Bay, each one larger than any facility Japan possessed. In Los Angeles, Yamamoto witnessed the emergence of the aviation industry that would spell doom for Japan. Douglas Aircraft Company, established just 6 years earlier, was already manufacturing advanced aircraft using revolutionary stressed skin construction techniques. The company employed 300 engineers experimenting with designs that would take a decade to reach Japan. What left a profound impression on Yamamoto was the extensive oil fields of Southern California. The Los Angeles region boasted over 20 significant oil fields, with Signal Hill alone featuring an astounding 265 wells so densely packed they resembled a forest of steel structures. Annually, California produced approximately 230 million barrels of oil, surpassing Japan's expected wartime consumption by more than 5 years. Meanwhile, the ports were rapidly expanding and modernizing. San Pedro and Long Beach were bustling with electric cranes and automated loading systems, capable of handling as much cargo in a single day as Tokyo Port managed in an entire week. The infrastructure for projecting power across the Pacific was already well established. Upon his return to Japan in March 1928, Yamamoto submitted a comprehensive 200-page report detailing American capabilities. This document should have put any thoughts of war to rest. His findings were clear and unequivocal. American manufacturing outstripped Japan's by factors ranging from 10 to 20 across every critical sector. The United States' oil production was approximately 100 times greater than Japan's wartime needs, while steel production exceeded that of Japan by a factor of 12. Additionally, the automotive industry's mass production capabilities demonstrated an immediate potential for conversion to military use. Aviation advancements in America were progressing so rapidly that Japan stood no chance of catching up. Unfortunately, Yamamoto's report was classified and largely ignored. The Navy Ministry focused on sections concerning American naval construction while dismissing the industrial analysis as irrelevant to naval concerns. Similarly, the Army, preoccupied with plans for expansion into China, paid little heed to Yamamoto's warnings about America's overwhelming power. As a result, Yamamoto found himself increasingly marginalized. His first-hand knowledge of American strengths not only failed to gain recognition, but also raised suspicions among his peers. Some people quietly criticized him for being too Americanized. His customs, such as drinking coffee instead of tea, smoking Lucky Strikes, and reading American magazines, set him apart as someone tainted by foreign influence. Yet, Yamamoto persisted in issuing his warnings. Lecture after lecture, article after article, he relentlessly drove home the same point. Japan could not prevail against America in a protracted conflict. The disparity between their industrial capabilities was both extensive and profound. America had developed an unparalleled system of innovation and production that continually improved. In contrast, Japan's limited resources and inflexible society made it impossible to match this dynamism. By 1939, Yamamoto's staunch opposition to war with the United States had made him a potential target for assassination by radical army officers. The same extremist factions responsible for assassinating moderate politicians now focused their attention on the admiral who maintained that Japan could not win a war against America. Fearing for his safety, Navy Minister Admiral Mitsumasaonai, who shared Yamamoto's views, reassigned him to see duty as Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet. The appointment, made public on August 30, 1939, was specifically intended to protect Yamamoto from harm. At sea, he would be shielded from army extremists. The irony was profound. The individual most opposed to war with America found himself in command of the force that would have to fight it. Yamamoto understood the grim logic. If war broke out, Japan required its best strategic mind at the helm of the fleet, even if that strategist believed the conflict was unwinnable. "I have been appointed as Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet," he confided in his friend Yoshida. "It is akin to being asked to perform surgery on a patient determined to commit suicide. I may be able to delay the inevitable suffering, but I cannot prevent the ultimate demise." His stance remained firm throughout. In September 1940, during discussions about entering a pact with Germany and Italy, Yamamoto cautioned that such an alliance would inevitably lead to war with America. To Prince Konoye, he was straightforward. If Japan were to engage the Americans, he could guarantee success for only 1 year. Beyond that period, no assurances could be made. In October 1940, when speaking to Navy Minister Admiral Koshiro Owa, Yamamoto's predictions became even more precise. If ordered into battle, he pledged his best efforts for 6 months, but admitted a lack of confidence beyond that point. The supreme irony of Yamamoto's career unfolded in January 1941 as he began planning the attack on Pearl Harbor. Despite knowing Japan could not win, he was tasked with finding a way to secure victory. His strategy drew heavily from his experiences in America. He recognized that while America possessed formidable material resources, its Achilles heel lay in psychological complacency. Sheltered by its vast geography and sense of invincibility, the United States did not anticipate an assault. A powerful initial strike could potentially shock them into negotiations before their industrial might mobilized for war. The plan was inherently risky because the situation itself was dire. Japan required the destruction of the American Pacific Fleet to prevent interference in Southeast Asian operations. Moreover, convincing America that the cost of engagement would be prohibitive was crucial. Even as he meticulously planned the assault, Yamamoto understood its ultimate failure, though not due to the initial attack's ineffectiveness. He was confident his pilots could devastate Pearl Harbor. The downfall would become evident when America's industrial capacity pivoted towards wartime production. He had examined the factories destined to churn out weaponry. He had assessed the oil reserves that would power the counteroffensive. He had witnessed the mass production methods that would construct vast fleets of ships and aircraft. The Pearl Harbor strike would achieve tactical success, but falter strategically, just as he foresaw. As 1941 advanced and war loomed ever closer, Yamamoto's warnings grew increasingly urgent and detailed. To his triumphant staff officers, he presented sobering statistics. America holds 500,000 tons of oil reserve for every ton Japan has. They manufacture 500 times more steel. Their factories can switch production lines to weaponry within weeks. We have already lost this war, we just haven't seen it begin yet. In September 1941, addressing the graduating class at his alma mater in Nagawa, Yamamoto delivered one of his most heartfelt warnings. Most people believe Americans are obsessed with luxury and shallow culture. This view is misguided. It's a grave mistake to underestimate them as frivolous and weak. They are brimming with vigor, daring, and tenacity. Their approach is scientifically advanced and forward-thinking. Charles Lindbergh's solo transatlantic flight epitomizes the kind of bold endeavor that is second nature to Americans. He concluded, "Do not forget that American industry far surpasses ours, and they have an abundance of oil. Japan cannot outmatch America. Thus, Japan ought not confront America." The recent graduates were left speechless as one of their nation's revered admirals declared that their country would be defeated in a conflict with the United States. Admiral Yamamoto was particularly candid in his discussions with Chu Kawabata, expressing his belief that the government had missiled its citizens. They portrayed America as weak and fractured, but he had first-hand experience there and knew otherwise. He described Japan's declaration of war against such a powerful adversary as akin to declaring battle against an immense dragon while being mere insects. The assault on Pearl Harbor exceeded initial expectations in terms of success. 8 battleships were either damaged or sunk, 188 aircraft destroyed, and over 2,400 Americans lost their lives. The losses incurred by the Japanese fleet were comparatively minimal, only 29 aircraft, 5 submarines, and 64 men killed. Across Japan, people took to the streets to celebrate, cheering the emperor's declaration of war with fervent cries of banzai. For many, this marked a decisive moment when Japan had demonstrated its might to arrogant colonial powers. On his flagship Nagato in Hiroshima Bay, Yamamoto received these reports quietly, while his staff opened sake bottles to toast their perceived triumph. He chose instead to withdraw into solitude within his quarters. Hours after the attack, Admiral Matt Ugaki discovered him engrossed in Pacific charts. Years afterward, Hollywood would attribute a famous quote about awakening a sleeping giant to Yamamoto, despite his never actually uttering those words. His actual documented remarks to Agata Kokura were more precise and less poetic. A soldier cannot boast of defeating an adversary who is not ready for battle. He further advised waiting until the enemy's actions revealed their true response before making any assessments, since it was clear that the outraged Americans would swiftly retaliate. While Yamamoto was disappointed by the failure to destroy the American aircraft carriers, he was even more troubled by the lack of damage inflicted on oil storage and repair facilities. During his visits to U.S. ports, he had seen firsthand how quickly they could rebuild. Although the destruction appeared severe, it was largely superficial. More troubling was the diplomatic mishap that made the attack a surprise for the Americans. Yamamoto had insisted on declaring war before initiating any attacks, but bureaucratic blunders at the Japanese embassy prevented this. As a result, the assault would be seen as dishonorable, ensuring no peace negotiations were possible. "I wished to fight an honorable war," he confided to Yugoki, "but we have instead ensured our own destruction through dishonor." True to his prediction, Japan's forces rampaged across the Pacific for half a year, sweeping aside Allied resistance with stunning efficiency. Singapore fell. The Philippines succumbed. The Dutch East Indies were conquered. By May 1942, Japanese control extended from India's borders to midway into the Pacific Ocean. Yamamoto derived no pleasure from these triumphs, recognizing them as mere mirages that were feasible only because the United States had yet to mobilize fully. He maintained charts in his quarters, illustrating the progress of American shipbuilding, which filled him with dread. During the first 6 months of 1942 alone, U.S. shipyards launched 2 aircraft carriers, 4 cruisers, 23 destroyers, and 26 submarines. This was merely a precursor to an even more alarming rate of production once full capacity was reached. Yamamoto's visits to American naval facilities had revealed their ongoing retooling efforts. When these were completed, the output would far exceed Japan's ability to sink vessels. The situation with oil supplies was equally dire. Even after capturing the Dutch East Indies oil fields, Japan could not match America's production levels. In a single month, America produced more crude oil than Japan's captured reserves yielded in an entire year. Furthermore, American synthetic rubber manufacturing, which Yamamoto had studied during his 1926 visit to the United States, rendered them independent of Asian rubber plantations. "We are like children who have stolen candy," he informed his operations officer, "celebrating while the adult prepares our punishment." The Battle of Midway commenced on June 4, 1942, almost exactly 6 months after Pearl Harbor. Yamamoto's prediction was about to come true with uncanny accuracy. The operation was intricate and possibly overcomplicated, reflecting his sense of urgency. He realized this might be Japan's final opportunity to eliminate American carriers before being overwhelmed by reinforcements. Intelligence indicated the United States had at most 2 operational aircraft carriers in the Pacific theater. However, they actually possessed 3 and enjoyed the advantage of having broken Japanese codes. The calamity unfolded exactly as Admiral Yamamoto had long anticipated. On that fateful day, 4 Japanese aircraft carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, were sunk in rapid succession, marking devastating losses for Japan. The nation lacked both the manufacturing capacity and skilled pilots necessary to recover from such a severe blow. Aboard the battleship Yamato, positioned 300 miles behind the carrier fleet, Yamamoto received the report silently. Upon learning that all 4 carriers had been lost, he simply nodded in acknowledgement. Staff officers later observed that he appeared somewhat relieved, as if a long-expected burden had finally come to pass. "The American Colossus is now fully awake," he remarked to his staff. "From this moment on, we can only strive to delay the inevitable." The subsequent numbers bore out his predictions. In the 18 months following Midway, America launched 17 fleet carriers and 76 escort carriers, while Japan managed to launch just 6 fleet carriers in total. Yamamoto's calculations at Harvard were proving accurate as American industrial output soared beyond even his pessimistic projections. By 1943, American factories were producing 1 aircraft every 5 minutes, 1 merchant ship per day, an aircraft carrier monthly, and 150 tanks daily, along with 500,000 military trucks annually. The The Ford Willow Run plant, which did not exist during Yamamoto's visit to Detroit, was churning out B-24 bombers at the rate of one every 63 minutes. This facility alone had been constructed in just 9 months, a feat that Japan could not match even for a single factory. Yamamoto received these intelligence reports with a grim sense of satisfaction. All of his predictions were coming true, and at an even faster pace than he had envisioned. The assembly lines he had observed in Detroit were now churning out weapons destined for Japan's downfall. The oil crisis was dire. By 1943, America was producing 1.7 billion barrels annually, while Japan's strategic reserves stood at just 50 million barrels and dwindling daily. American submarines were sinking Japanese ships carrying precious fuel from Southeast Asia with unmatched efficiency. He warned them about the oil. Yamamoto wrote in his private diary, "I presented them with the figures. They chose to ignore it. Now our vessels remain idle for lack of fuel as American fleets roam freely." Throughout 1942 and early 1943, Yamamoto led the combined fleet, knowing full well that defeat was inevitable. His post-war letters to Chiyo Kawai reveal a man tormented by his presence. "I am like a physician treating a terminally ill patient, able only to alleviate symptoms and postpone the inevitable end. The fatal condition is Japan's industrial inferiority." This realization weighed heavily on him, leading to growing fatalism. He began taking unnecessary risks, putting himself in harm's way more frequently. During visits to forward bases, he insisted on visiting the most dangerous spots, as if seeking a death that would free him from commanding a doomed fleet. Admiral Isoroku noted in his diary, "The commander-in-chief seems to embrace danger. He understands something we refuse to face, that our fate is already sealed. His burden lies not in command, but in prophecy fulfilled." This assessment penned by Yamamoto in March 1943 was grim. America has already replaced every ship lost at Pearl Harbor twice, and within a single year they have trained more pilots than Japan could train in 2 decades. Our production capabilities are diminishing monthly while theirs are increasing exponentially. The outcome is dictated not by bravery, but by the numbers. These statistics spell our doom. On April 14, 1943, American codebreakers deciphered Yamamoto's travel plans. He was scheduled to visit forward bases in the Solomon Islands on April 18th, flying from Rabaul to Balail Island with a precise timetable that mirrored his meticulous nature. Operation Vengeance received approval at the highest echelons of command. Admiral Chester Nimitz questioned whether revealing American decryption abilities would be worthwhile. The consensus was affirmative, as Yamamoto's irreplaceable status says both a strategist and insightful analyst of American capabilities made him a critical target. P-38 Lightning fighters were dispatched from Guadalcanal on April 18th, flying at wave height to evade radar detection while navigating over 435 miles of open sea. Their mission required pinpoint accuracy to intercept Yamamoto's plane just as it approached Bougainville Island. The very technology that brought about his downfall was a testament to the warnings he had issued. These P-30As were products of American mass production, equipped with powerful Allison engines generating 600 horsepower each and fueled by high-octane gasoline from Texas refineries. Their navigation was flawless, their timing impeccable, and their execution without fault. At precisely 9:34 a.m., Yamamoto's Mitsubishi G4M bomber was shot down over the dense jungle of Bougainville. A man who knew firsthand the might of America's manufacturing prowess was killed by its products. Advanced fighter planes guided by code-breaking technology that Japan could not match were involved in his death. His body was discovered the following day, still strapped to his seat with a hand on his sword. In his coat pocket was a poem he had written days earlier, "I have seen the future, and it belongs to those who build, not those who destroy." The passing of Yamamoto eliminated the only Japanese leader who truly grasped the futility of Japan's position. His replacement, Admiral Minachi Koga, did not possess Yamamoto's strategic foresight or his intimate knowledge of American capabilities. The prophecy Yamamoto had made in 1940, that 6 months to a year of victories would be followed by inevitable defeat, came true exactly as predicted. Every prediction he had based on his observations of America proved accurate. American production overwhelmed Japanese forces, just as Yamamoto had calculated. American oil reserves were virtually unlimited compared to Japan's rapidly diminishing supplies. American technological advancements, especially in radar and code breaking, provided significant advantages. The United States' mass production techniques enabled quick replacement of losses. Conversion from civilian to military production was faster than even Yamamoto's direct warnings suggested. By 1944, America was producing more war materials in a month than Japan could produce in an entire year. Factories that Yamamoto had visited in the 1920s were now operating at unprecedented levels of efficiency. The River Road plant alone produced more military vehicles than all of Japan's factories combined. August 1945 marked the ultimate validation of Yamamoto's warnings. The atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki demonstrated American industrial and scientific capabilities that even he had not fully anticipated, though he had warned about America's technological superiority. The Manhattan Project cost $2 billion, more than Japan's total military budget for the war. The operation involved 130,000 workers and consumed more electricity than entire cities in Japan. It demanded a level of industrial accuracy that the country could not achieve. The bombs were dropped by between 9 superfortresses, each costing more than a Japanese destroyer and produced in numbers Japan couldn't rival. Captain Ellis Zacharias, who played poker with Admiral Yamamoto during their days in Washington, broadcast messages to Japan in Japanese, reminding listeners of Yamamoto's warnings. Your Admiral Yamamoto foresaw this moment coming. He had observed our factories, oil fields, and laboratories. Despite his efforts to warn them, the people chose not to heed his advice. The war's final statistics validated every prediction Yamamoto made. Here are the production figures from 1941 to 1945 to aircraft. USA produced 300,000 compared to Japan's 76 320 aircraft carriers. USA built 141 versus Japan's 16. Battleships A had 8 compared to Japan's 2 submarines. USA constructed 203 while Japan made 126. USA tonnage was 33,993 32 tons against Japan's 4153 61 tons. These numbers were not mere figures but concrete evidence of the industrial might Yamamoto had witnessed firsthand. It was an unstoppable force that any isolated island nation relying on imported resources could not overcome once it mobilized fully. After Japan's surrender, American occupation forces uncovered Yamamoto's personal papers, including unsent letters and unpublished diaries. These documents revealed the extent of his prescience and despair. In a letter dated December 1, 1941, to Emperor Hirohito, Yamamoto wrote, "Your Majesty, I have failed in my duty to prevent this war. Having seen America's strength firsthand, I know we cannot prevail. Their factories can produce an endless supply of weapons, and their oil fields can sustain unlimited operations. Once our people are roused, they will not rest until total victory is achieved. I can promise Your Majesty half a year of triumphs. Beyond that point, the laws of mathematics take over. We are 70 million individuals with limited resources battling against 130 million opponents with an endless supply. The result is inevitable." This letter was addressed to Admiral Koja shortly before my passing. "You will inherit a fleet destined for failure, not due to a lack of bravery or expertise, but because of the overwhelming industrial might of our adversaries. For every ship lost, they produce 3 replacements. Each aircraft destroyed leads to 10 more being built by them. Every gallon of fuel consumed brings us closer to immobilization while they have an abundance of oil reserves. I have personally witnessed the manufacturing capabilities firsthand. We are not merely fighting a nation, we face a vast industrial machine spanning entire continents. Defend as long as duty and honor require, yet acknowledge that defeat is assured." The true irony in Yamamoto's narrative does not stem from his demise, but rather from the circumstances of his life. The individual who best comprehended America's formidable strength was compelled to lead Japan into war against it. The admiral, aware of Japan's inevitable loss, had to devise an attack plan that sealed its fate. A visionary who cautioned against provoking a sleeping giant found himself delivering the blow that awakened it. Upon learning of Yamamoto's involvement in Pearl Harbor, his Harvard classmates were shocked. Professor Theodore McNally, who instructed Yamamoto in economics, believed he knew better than anyone else that Japan could not secure victory. He examined our steel mills, oil wells, and assembly lines. His grasp of mass production was evident. Planning Pearl Harbor must have been a torment for him. However, Yamamoto had no alternative. Within Japan's strict military hierarchy, refusal equated to personal dishonor as well as an abandonment of his duty to mitigate the impending disaster he foresaw. While he could not prevent the conflict, perhaps initial victories could shorten it and pave the way for negotiations. Japanese military historians who studied Yamamoto's pre-war warnings after the war acknowledged their former blindness. All of Yamamoto's predictions were borne out by subsequent events. Every warning was later vindicated. Admiral Somu Toyoda, who commanded naval forces in the war's final phase, conceded, "Yamamoto saw what we refuse to acknowledge. Having visited America, he understood its industrial might. We dismissed his concerns as pessimistic. We believed that our spiritual resolve could surpass their material superiority. He knew this was a fallacy." Prime Minister Hideki Tojo, who had advocated for war, testified at his war crimes trial. Yamamoto informed us that victory was unattainable. Having studied in America, he comprehended the industrial capabilities of the United States. We believed he was overly influenced by Western thought. We were mistaken. He was merely stating the truth. This tragedy extended far beyond personal blindness. Japan's military hierarchy overlooked the one individual who had genuinely examined their adversary's capabilities. They favored comforting delusions over harsh realities. The faith in mystical beliefs about Japanese superiority overshadowed empirical evidence of American might. Ironically, Yamamoto was more esteemed by his adversaries than by his own government. American naval officers who knew him expressed sincere regret upon learning of his demise, even as they celebrated the tactical victory. Admiral Chester Nimitz, who had sanctioned Operation Vengeance, later stated that Yamamoto was the sole Japanese leader to truly grasp American power. He had observed our nation's industry and psychology firsthand. His death was both necessary and sorrowful. As a man who understood the truth, but was compelled to act against it, he was admired by his poker partner from the 1920s, Ellis Zacharias, who penned an insightful epitaph. Yamamoto was regarded as a prophet unappreciated in his own country, having witnessed our economic prowess and cautioned against challenging it. He recognized that contemporary warfare is won through industrial might rather than battlefield victories. His misfortune lay in being excessively perceptive within a culture where conformity was prized over truth. Captain Layton, who played a role in deciphering Japanese codes, remarked, "We eliminated the one Japanese leader who could have shortened the war." Yamamoto knew Japan had already lost before the conflict began. After his death, leadership shifted to individuals who believed their own propaganda, extending the war for 2 more devastating years. Declassified documents from the 1970s revealed the extent of Yamamoto's extensive intelligence gathering on America. His reports from the 1920s were strikingly precise in forecasting American wartime manufacturing output. He had estimated aircraft production capacity with an accuracy of within 10% of the actual wartime peak figures. His predictions for oil and steel production were off by just 5% and 15%, respectively, compared to the real wartime levels. Shipbuilding capabilities also matched up closely, being only 20% shy of the final wartime output. His approach was methodical and thorough. He meticulously measured factory floor space, analyzed worker productivity, evaluated supply chain effectiveness, and projected potential wartime production capacity. Despite using slide rules and notebooks for his calculations, they proved to be more accurate than many contemporary computer models. Perhaps most impressively, he foresaw the psychological ramifications of a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. In a 1940 memo, he stated, "A sudden strike at Pearl Harbor would yield tactical success but strategic failure. American unity and fury would follow, unleashing an unstoppable industrial force. Yamamoto's narrative extends beyond his historical context, serving as a cautionary tale against the peril of ignoring mathematical facts in favor of wishful thinking. He had seen the numbers, observed the production processes, and calculated the outcomes with precision. The irony of his plight was that no one wanted to hear what he knew. In his final letter to Chiyo Kawai, penned shortly before his death, Yamamoto found a measure of peace. "I have fulfilled my duty as I understood it," he wrote. "I warned them based on my observations and calculations regarding factories, oil reserves, and relentless production capabilities. Despite this, they chose war, leading their fleet to what was inevitable defeat. I hoped only to mitigate the catastrophic consequences. History will determine if I acted wisely in supporting a losing cause. Yet, I could not turn my back on my country despite its abandonment of reason." The letter ended with a poignant haiku that encapsulated his entire journey. "Spring rain in Texas, where I saw iron transform into doom. Mathematics overcomes courage." Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto passed away knowing every prediction he made would be realized. His 6 months of victories precisely spanned from December 7, 1941 to June 4, 1942. The industrial surge he had cautioned against materialized with meticulous accuracy. The behemoth he feared rose with the exact same resolve he predicted. Years spent in America at Harvard, studying petroleum engineering in Detroit, observing assembly lines in Texas, counting oil wells in Washington, and measuring economic capacity provided him with unparalleled foresight. He saw not only America's current strength, but also its untapped potential. Modern warfare, as he understood it, was won through production statistics rather than warrior spirit. The factories he had toured during his time as a student and attachet became the arsenals that dismantled the empire he served. The oil fields he studied fueled the fleets that obliterated his navy. The assembly lines he witnessed produced the aircraft that incinerated Japanese cities. Each notebook filled with observations turned into a prophecy of doom come true. However, Yamamoto's story is ultimately about courage in confronting power with unwelcome truths. He perceived what others ignored, calculated what others refused to count, and warned against what others chose not to hear. His tragedy lay not in being wrong, but in being absolutely correct. In the end, Admiral Yamamoto's American education taught him a bitter lesson: in modern industrial warfare, mathematics dictates destiny. He had done the calculations, observed the factors, and predicted the outcome. Japan would have 6 months of unchecked freedom, followed by inevitable defeat at the hands of an awakened industrial giant. The man who spent years warning that Japan would lose within 6 months became history's most tragic prophet. Doomed to command a doomed conflict that he recognized as unwinnable even before it began, felled by the very American weaponry he had predicted would be decisive, and proven right only in the aftermath of his nation's downfall. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto had encountered America and understood